All right, here we go. In this video, we're going to show how we solve our inequalities, exactly what we've been doing. But the piece that we're going to add is the distributive property. Now, you should have heard of the distributive property from 6th grade. So again, this isn't really anything new. It's just putting together all the things we've learned about equations and inequalities. Let's start with the equation on the left, show how it's done. The distributive property says, hey, whatever the number, the coefficient that's on the outside of my parentheses, it needs to be distributed with multiplication to everything on the inside. So let's take a look at this problem here. If I have the 3 that's on the outside of my parentheses, outside of my grouping, then in order to kind of put this as one full equation, we can go ahead and distribute with multiplication to everything on the inside. So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to do 3 times a negative 4h. Well, 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. And go ahead and keep the h. And then we're going to start over, but with the minus 1 or the negative 1. 3 times negative 1 is a negative 3 or a minus 3. So now we have negative 12h minus 3 is equal to 45. And now we have a two-step inequality that we can solve much like we normally do. Draw your line down your equal sign. On the left-hand side, the first thing we need to do is get rid of the minus 3 or the negative 3. And the opposite or the inverse would be to add 3 or a positive 3. Negative 3, positive 3 makes 0. And we're left with negative 12h. On the other side, we need to add 3. 45 plus 3 is 48. And now our last step, since that says negative 12 times h, the inverse, the opposite, will be to divide each side by negative 12. Negative 12 divided by negative 12 makes 1. And so we're left with h equals 48 divided by negative 12 is negative 4. H equals negative 4. That's the equation piece of this. Now, look at the right-hand side. Looks very similar. There's just the inequality instead of an equal sign. We have 3 times negative 4h minus 1 is less than or equal to 45. But we'll do this the exact same way. So the first thing we did, we distributed with multiplication. 3 times negative 4h and 3 times negative 1. 3 times negative 4h is negative 12h. And 3 times the negative 1 makes negative 3. And that's less than or equal to 45. From here, we can draw our line down our inequality and begin solving this just like we would any other two-step inequality. We'll go ahead and add 3 to both sides. That's the inverse of negative 3 or minus 3. Negative 3 plus 3 makes 0, and we're left with negative 12h. On the other side, 45 plus 3 makes 48. Since now we have multiplication, we need to go ahead and divide by negative 12. Negative 12 divided by negative 12 makes 1, and we're left with h. 48 divided by negative 12 makes negative 4. And now here's going to be kind of the tricky part. If you remember from the last video, we divided by a negative. What happens when we either multiply or divide by a negative coefficient? Well, we take our inequality of less than or equal to, and we now need to flip it to say greater than or equal to. So our solution for the inequality is h is greater than or equal to negative 4. Now let's go ahead and put that on our number line. So remember, we're dealing with the negative part of this. So let's go negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1. Let's start by putting a circle at our numerical answer of -4. There's our circle. Since we have the or equal to, it's greater than or equal to, we need to shade in that circle. Since -4 is part of the solution, we have to shade it in. And then here's the tricky part because we're dealing with negatives. If the answer is h is greater than or equal to -4, we need to shade all the stuff that's greater than -4. And that would actually be the -3, the -2, the -1, and so on to 0, and eventually the positives. Think temperature. Okay? -1 is warmer than -4, and -6 is colder than -4. It's more negative, it's less than, it's colder. But there's our solution. There's how we distribute, we solve, and we can graph our inequalities.